In this lesson, we're going to discuss the Pathfinder panel. If you'd like to follow along, go to File, Open, and in the Working Files folder, go into chapter number 4, Power of the Pathfinder, and just click Open. If your Pathfinder panel is not open, go under your Window menu to Object and Layout, Pathfinder. Why don't we start by going through the Paths section of the panel. First, I'm going to go to my selection tool and click and drag across these two lines to select both of them. And then click on Join Path. And you can see it joined the two paths into one. The 2 points that were closest together joined together to make a single path. Also, if I select a single path that's still an open path, I can click on Join Path. It will connect the two endpoints of that open path. So now I have a closed path. This next button will make a closed path into an open path. So actually, one of the corners is no longer closed. I can tell that it's this one, but let me just show you. I'm going to go to my Direct Selection tool and click on that corner and now drag. And you can see it's no longer closed. Let me hit Command or Control Z and then Command or Control Z again to make it a closed path again. Let me go back to my selection tool and click on this object that we joined together into a single object. I can also close paths here. If I have an open path, it will take the two endpoints and connect them together. But what is this about? It looks like a line going around in a circle or something. Well, if I click on an open path that has a symbol on the end or the beginning of it, like an arrow, and I look at it and I really want the arrow to be on the other side. Instead of the beginning, I want it on the end. Well, if I do reverse path, it makes the beginning the end. So now the arrow is on the other side. Let's talk about Pathfinder. Let me move my Pathfinder panel over to the other side and zoom in on the blue and the red squares. And we're going to go through the various possibilities for Pathfinder. I'm going to start by selecting both of my objects, just by clicking and dragging across parts of those objects with my selection tool. The first button is called Add, and it actually combines the two shapes into one when I click on it. I'm going to keep hitting Command Z or Control Z to undo what I just did. The next button will subtract the frontmost object from the back object. So it's going to take this little chunk out of the red object. Let's try that. And that's what it does. I'm going to keep undoing, Command Z, Control Z. This next button will only leave the intersection of the two objects. Let me undo that. This next button will exclude any overlap, so it's just the opposite of intersection. Anything that intersects, it gets rid of, it excludes it. Let me undo that. This next button will minus the back object from the top object. So creating more complex shapes becomes a lot easier using Pathfinder. Let me undo this. I'm going to zoom out. I'm going to hit Command 0 on a Mac, Control 0 on a PC, and I'm going to select my circle. The next section is Convert Shape. If I drew a circle and I really wanted it to be a rectangle or a square, I could click on Convert Shape to a rectangle. And if you watch the bounding box, it's going to create that rectangle within the bounding box. The next shape is going to convert the rectangle into a rounded rectangle, and you can see the corners are slightly rounded. The next button will convert the rounded rectangle into a beveled rectangle, and you can see that the corners are beveled off. The next one will convert the shape into an inverse rounded rectangle. So it's rounded, but the round corners are going inward. Then I could go back to an ellipse just by clicking on the next button, or a triangle, or a polygon, and you can see that it's doing all of this within the bounding box. So the position of the bounding box does not change, and it draws the object inside of that bounding box to the exact dimensions of the bounding box. This next button will convert the shape into a line, and it's a diagonal line that fits perfectly within that bounding box. Now, I'm going to select just one of the corners of this object. So I'm going to go to something called the Direct Selection tool. If you ever need to select less than a full object, in other words, 1 point or 2 points in an object, go to your Direct Selection tool and click on the point. Now, in the Convert Point section, I selected a point that doesn't have any handles. It just comes into a corner. It is not a curve of any kind. If I click on Symmetrical, it's going to make symmetrical handles. And you can see there they are. If I click on the next button, Smooth changes the selected point to be a continuous curve with connected handles. So that's not going to change this, but watch what happens if I click on the next button. It's going to make it into handles that are no longer connected together. So with that point still selected, if I go to Plane, which doesn't have any handles, it's just a corner, and then I go back to Smooth, you can see now it's smooth. But look, the two handles are not symmetrical. To get them to be symmetrical, I click on Symmetrical. So the length of the two handles is exactly the same. So there's obviously a lot of things that you can do with the Pathfinder panel that without the panel would be quite difficult. Another way to combine objects is to make those objects into a compound path. Let me show you. I'm going to go to my Selection tool and select the magenta and the purple circle. And I'm going to go under my Object menu to Paths, Make Compound Path. And what that's going to do is the path that's on top becomes a hole in the path below. So this is actually see-through. Let me show you. I can see the green square right through the hole in the center of my circles. In the next lesson, we're going to continue discussing objects.